The doors of Stormcrest opened before her like the mouth of something old and hungry, and Sorrel knew at once that she should have stayed home. Warm light spilled across the marble. 1,000 candles burned in the high hall, and beneath them stood the whole of the realm, every pack that mattered, every lord and lady of Verith gathered for the longest night of the year. The music was gold, the laughter was gold, and she, in her plain grey gown, felt like a smudge of ash carried in on the wind. She had almost turned back at the threshold when her heel caught the lip of the top stair. The floor tilted, her stomach dropped, and then a hand closed around her arm, steady as iron, and held her upright as though she weighed nothing at all. "Careful," said a low voice at her shoulder. She looked up. The man was tall, taller than any she had stood beside, with a short dark beard and a scar that ran pale through one brow. His eyes were the grey of a gathering storm, and for one strange moment they moved across her face as if he were reading something written there in a language she did not know she carried. Then a servant murmured at his side and drew him away, and he was gone into the crowd before she could so much as thank him. Sorrel pressed a hand flat to her chest and made herself breathe. Whoever he was, he had not flinched, and he had not laughed. That was already more than the night was likely to give her. She found Corvin near the center of the floor, holding court as though the whole kingdom already knelt to him. 2 winters ago, he had been her mate. 2 winters ago, he had promised her forever before the entire Ashmore pack and had not meant a single word of it. Now his hand rested easy at the waist of another woman, and that woman turned and smiled, and Sorrel felt the room still around them, the way water stills before it freezes. Calanthe was beautiful the way a drawn blade is beautiful. A silver gown, pale eyes, a smile filed to a fine and deliberate point. "You came," Calanthe said, and she pitched her voice to carry, because carrying was the whole purpose of it. "How brave of you. I did wonder whether they still let wolfless creatures through the gate." A ripple of laughter moved out through the nearest circle of nobles. Sorrel felt it land on her skin like sleet. "Never let them see you flinch," her mother had told her once near the end. "It is the one thing they can truly steal from you, so do not hand it over." Sorrel held to those words now the way a drowning woman holds to a rope. "Good evening," she said. Her voice did not shake, and she was fiercely proud of that. "The alliance suits you. You wear it well." Something flickered behind Calanthe's smile, there and gone. She had wanted tears. She had wanted the reject to crumble in front of the finest gathering in the realm, and Sorrel had refused her, and the refusal only made the blade dig deeper. "Corvan," Calanthe said sweetly, without looking away from her, "did you not once tell me she could not even shift beneath a full moon? That the Ashmore healer laid hands on her and found nothing at all inside her? Nothing but a girl?" Corvan had the decency at least to hesitate, but it was only hesitation, the pause of a man deciding how the wind blew, and the wind blew toward his new Luna. He smiled and shrugged one shoulder as if the matter bored him. "She was a mistake I have since corrected," he said. And there it was. The whole hall heard it. The laughter came louder now, unafraid, and Sorrel stood alone in all that gold light with the word wolfless clinging to her like smoke, while the man who had once sworn to protect her looked at her as though she were a stain he had scrubbed from his floor. She would not cry, she had promised her mother. She fixed her eyes on the tall windows beyond the dais and counted her own heartbeats, and waited for the moment to pass, because moments like this always passed if you could only outlast them. And then, from the high seat at the far end of the hall, a chair scraped back across stone. The sound was small. It should have been swallowed whole by the music and the laughter. Instead, the music faltered, and the laughter died in 100 throats at once, because everyone in that hall knew who sat in that seat, and no one in living memory had seen him rise for anyone. The Alpha King stood. He came down from the dais slowly, and the crowd peeled back from him like a tide drawing off a shore, and Sorrel saw the scar through his brow and the storm grey of his eyes and knew, far too late, exactly whose hand had caught her on the stair. He crossed the whole length of the silent hall. He stopped in front of her, and in a voice that reached every corner of that vast and breathless room, the king of all Vareth said one word: "Sorrel." He knew her name. That was the thought that swallowed every other thought in Sorrel's head. She had never been presented to him, never stood in his court, never once crossed the path of the king of Verith in all her small and shuttered life, and yet he had spoken her name into the silence as though he had carried it in his mouth for years. "Your Majesty," Corvan managed. He had gone the color of old ash, Forgive me, I did not realize you were acquainted with the girl. We are not, the king said. He did not turn to look at Corvin when he said it. His eyes stayed on Sorrel, and there was something in them that was not pity, which was the only thing she had learned to expect from the faces of powerful men. I have simply grown tired, he went on, of standing in my own hall and listening to men congratulate themselves for the cruelty of throwing away what they were too small to understand. The words fell into the room like stones into a still pond. No one breathed. Calanthe recovered first. She dipped into a curtsy so low it was nearly a mockery of its own. Your Majesty is gracious, she said. But surely a king has better things to spend his mercy upon than a wolfless cast-off of no name and no pack. She has a name, the king said. You heard me speak it. As for her pack, that is a matter I mean to settle here and now, before all of you, so that no one may claim afterward that it was done in shadow. He turned then and swept his gaze across the assembled lords of the realm, and Sorrel watched the most powerful people she had ever seen shrink beneath it. By the old law, he said, a wolf cast out without cause and without trial may be claimed into the household of any alpha who will have her. I am an alpha. I will have her. From this night, the woman called Sorrel stands under the protection of the crown of Vareth, and any hand raised against her is a hand raised against me. The hall erupted, though not in sound, for no one dared to make a sound. It erupted in 100 small violent movements, glances thrown between allies, fans lifted to hide moving lips, the whole careful machine of the court lurching into motion beneath its polished surface. Sorrel saw Corvin's jaw work. She saw the smile finally break on Calanthe's beautiful face, and beneath it, for the space of a breath, something raw and furious that had not planned for any of this. Come, he said to her, and offered his arm. She stared at it. She was aware of the whole court waiting to see what the reject would do. She thought of the healer at Ashmore, pressing cold hands to her ribs and shaking his head. She thought of Corvin's voice saying a mistake I have since corrected. Then she laid her fingers on the king's sleeve and let him lead her the length of the hall, past every face that had laughed, and not one of them was laughing now. They did not stop until they had passed through a side door into a quiet gallery, where the noise of the hall became a distant sea. Only then did Sorrel pull her hand back, and only then did the trembling she had held at bay for an hour finally break loose in her fingers. Why, she said. It came out rougher than she meant it to. Why would you do that? You do not know me. You gain nothing by it. You have just made an enemy of Ashmore and of half your own court. For a woman who cannot even— She stopped, and made herself say the word, for a wolfless woman. The king watched her for a long moment. Up close, the storm grey of his eyes was softer than it had looked across the hall, and more tired. Is that what you believe you are? He asked. It is what I am, she said. It is what every healer who has ever touched me has said. Everyone in that room could see it. No, he said quietly. They could not see anything at all. That is precisely the trouble with them. And then he did a strange thing. He leaned in, not close enough to touch, only close enough that she felt the warmth of him, and he drew a slow breath, the way a wolf draws in a scent it is trying to place. His eyes half closed. Something moved across his face that she would spend the rest of the night trying to understand, wonder and grief and a terrible dawning certainty all at once. When he straightened, his voice had changed. You are not what they think you are, he said. You are not what you think you are either, and someone has gone to a very great deal of trouble to keep it that way. Sorrel's heart slammed against her ribs. Her hand rose without her willing it to the small cord at her throat, to the tarnished silver moon that hung there against her skin, the last thing her mother had ever given her, the thing she had worn every day of her life and never once removed. What do you mean? She whispered. But the king only stepped back and bowed his head to her as though she were something far greater than a cast-off in a grey gown and said, You must be tired. My people will show you to your rooms. We will speak again when the moon is down. And it was that last phrase, when the moon is down, that turned the blood in Sorrel's veins to ice. Because there was one thing about herself that no healer had ever found, one thing she had hidden so deeply and so long that she had almost taught herself it was not real, and it only ever happened at night. The rooms they gave her were larger than the whole of the cottage she had grown up in. A maid with kind eyes and a soft voice, a girl called Win, drew her a bath and laid out a nightgown of linen so fine it felt like water, and chattered gently until she saw that Sorrel wanted quiet, then fell silent and worked with a tact that could have made her weep. No one had shown her simple kindness in a very long time. It undid her more than cruelty ever had. "There is a door there," Wynne said at last, nodding to the far wall, where a narrow door stood set into the paneling. "It leads to the king's solar. He reads there of a night. He asked me to tell you that you need never open it, but that if you should ever wish to speak with him, he will hear you through it." Then Wynne curtsied and slipped away, and Sorrel was alone. She looked at that narrow door for a long time, then at the tall window, where the last light had drained from the sky and the first stars had come out cold and clear, and she felt the thing inside her begin to wake. It always began the same way. A warmth beneath the silver moon at her throat, as though the little pendant had been left too near a fire. Then a loosening deep in her chest, in the marrow of her, as though something bound very tightly for a very long time had been given the smallest breath of slack. Her senses sharpened, the candle flames grew brighter. She could smell the rosemary in the bathwater and the beeswax on the floors, and, faint and far through stone, the scent of the king himself, cedar and cold iron, and something underneath it that made her breath catch. Sorrel went to the mirror, the way she did every night, though she hated what she saw there, or rather, she hated that she did not hate it. Her eyes had turned to silver, not the pale gray of an ordinary wolf. Silver, bright as the moon itself, shining faintly in the dark like two coins at the bottom of a well. It had first happened the night after her mother died, when she was 9 years old, and it had never once come by day, and no healer had ever seen it, because Sorrel had learned before she was 10 that this was the one secret she must carry to her grave. "You are wolfless," the healer at Ashmore had told her family, pressing his cold hands to her ribs and finding nothing, no wolf, no scent, and no beast beneath the girl. And he had been telling the truth as far as he could tell it. For the little charm at her throat, the last gift of a dying woman, hid her from every sense a wolf possessed. It masked her scent so that she smelled of nothing at all. It smothered her wolf so deep that no healer's hands could find it. By day, she was exactly what the world believed her to be, a plain and powerless girl with no beast in her at all. But the moon was older than any silver charm, and at night, when it climbed the sky, the binding strained, and the truth of her rose up beneath her skin and looked out through her own 2 eyes. "You must hide it," her mother had said, so weak by then she could barely lift her hand to Sorrel's cheek. "Whatever comes, whatever they call you, however they hurt you, never let them see what you are at night. There are those who would give anything to find what I have hidden in you. The pendant keeps you hidden from them. But it also keeps you hidden from yourself, my love, and one day you will have to choose. Not yet, but one day." Sorrel had never understood what her mother meant. She had only obeyed. For 11 years she had smothered the thing inside her and let the whole world believe she was empty. She had let Corvin believe it. She had let him cast her out for a hollowness that was not even real. And she had said nothing, because saying anything meant lifting the veil her mother had died to weave. And now a king had drawn one breath of her on a staircase and known. The thought terrified her. Stormcrest, for all its warmth, might be the most dangerous place she had ever set foot, for the man behind that narrow door could smell what no one else ever had. She did not sleep. Near the deepest hour, when the palace had gone silent, she heard the small sounds of a man settling into a chair on the other side of the paneled door, the creak of leather, the turn of a page. And then quietly, as though he had known she was awake, his voice came through the wood. "I meant what I told you," he said. "You need never open it." Sorrel sat very still. Her eyes, she knew, were burning silver in the dark. She did not dare go near the door. She did not dare let even a sliver of that light show through the crack at its foot. "Then why speak to me at all?" she said. "Because you are frightened," he said simply, "and because I would rather you were frightened with company than frightened alone. I have been the second thing. I did not care for it." Her chest ached, and she drew her knees up under the fine linen and stared at the thin line of dark where the door met the floor. "You know what I am," she said. It was not a question. "I know what you are not," he said carefully. "I know you are not wolfless. Beyond that I would not presume. A wolf keeps her own counsel until she chooses otherwise. I will not take by force what you are not ready to give." "Most men take," Sorrel said before she could stop herself. "I am not most men," he said. And there was no boast in it, only a great and quiet weariness, the sound of a man who had learned the difference at a cost. They talked a while longer, of nothing and of everything, a king on one side of a narrow door and a woman with moonlight in her eyes on the other. neither able to see the other, both a little less alone than either had been in a long time. And when at last she heard him rise and bid her good night and go, Sorrel lay back with her silver eyes fixed on the ceiling and felt something she had no name for and no right to. Then, from beyond the window, far out in the sleeping city, she heard it, the long rising note of a hunting horn, and a moment later, an answer, closer, and a third, closer still. Someone was hunting in the dead of the longest night, inside the walls of the king's own city, and every instinct her mother had buried in her woke at once and screamed that they were hunting for her. In the morning the horns were explained away as a boar hunt, a lord's amusement, nothing more. Sorrel did not believe it, and she could see that the king did not believe it either, though he said only that she was not to walk the palace alone, set 2 silent guards at her door, and watched her across the breakfast table with a weight in his grey eyes that told her more than any warning could. By day she was safe. By day her eyes were her own dull hazel and her scent was nothing at all, and she could pass among the court of Verith as exactly the thing they despised, a wolfless cast-off the king had taken in on a whim. And despise her they did. She learned it within an hour of leaving her rooms. The court did not insult her to her face, for she was under the crown's protection now and no one was fool enough to forget it. Instead, they did it in the old way, loud enough to be heard and quiet enough to be denied. A boar hunt, one lady murmured to another as Sorrel passed. In midwinter, how the king does spoil his new pet. They say he means to make her his Luna, said another, and laughed. A wolfless Luna. The line of Verith bred down to nothing at last. It is a sickness in him, said a third, older and colder. A strong king does not gather up broken things. He was strong once, before the war, before he lost his first. Sorrel kept her face still and let none of it show, the way her mother had taught her, but she filed the words away, and one phrase turned over and over in her mind long after the voices had faded, before he lost his first. She did not know what it meant, she only knew that it had made even those cruel women drop their voices, and that whatever it was, it sat behind the king's tiredness like a stone at the bottom of a river. It was in the long gallery, near midday, that she learned the thing that changed everything. She had slipped into an alcove behind a tapestry to escape the stairs, and was catching her breath when 2 men entered the gallery and stopped, close enough that she could hear every word, hidden enough that they could not see her. "It is done, then," said the first. She knew the voice. It was Corvan's. "It is done," said the second, oilier, a stranger. "The healer has been paid and gone north where no one will find him. He will swear what he was paid to swear, that he examined the girl years ago and found her hollow, and that he stands by it. There is no one left alive to call it a lie. And the crown will accept it," Corvan said. "The crown will have no choice. A king may take a stray under the old law, but he cannot keep a proven fraud in his household. When we said the healer's sworn word before the council, that the girl was declared wolfless in good faith and cast out lawfully, the king will be made to give her back. And once she is home at Ashmore, well, Corvan. Strays have accidents." Sorrel stood behind the tapestry with her hand pressed hard over her own mouth, and saw, all at once and far too late, the true shape of her whole ruined life. She had not been cast out because she was wolfless. She had been declared wolfless because they wished to cast her out. Calanthe's family had wanted the Ashmore alliance, had wanted Corvan, had wanted her gone, and so they had paid a healer to lay cold hands on a frightened girl and lie. And her mother's pendant, the thing that hid her true self from every wolf alive, had made the lie so easy. There was nothing to find in her. There never had been, to any hand that touched her. She had been the perfect victim, hidden even from those who might have saved her by the very charm that kept her safe. They had not thrown away a hollow woman. They had thrown away an inconvenient one, and now, because a king had made her matter again, they meant to finish what they had begun. She did not remember crossing the palace. She only knew that when the moon rose that night and her eyes burned silver in the dark, she was already sitting on the floor with her back against the narrow panelled door, and that when she heard the king settle into his chair on the other side, the whole terrible story came pouring out of her in a low and shaking voice. All of it, the healer, the payment, the plan to drag her back to Ashmore and see her meet with an accident on the road. He was quiet a long time after she finished. She could hear him breathing on the other side of the wood, slow and deliberate, a man holding something down. "I am going to ask you one question," he said at last, very quiet and very careful. "And I need you to answer it honestly, because I will know if you do not. I can smell a lie the way you can see a color. It is the one gift my blood has never let me set aside. Do you understand? Yes, Sorel whispered. Are you afraid of me? He asked, and she saw what he was truly asking. Not whether she feared the hunt or the council or the road to Ashmore, he was asking whether she counted him among the men who would use her, whether the king who could smell every lie she told believed, in the deep animal center of herself, that he was one more danger in a life that had been made of them. No, she said, and she felt the truth of it settle in her chest, even as she spoke it. I am not afraid of you. Through the wood, she heard him let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a very long time. Good, he said softly. Then hear me. No one is taking you back to Ashmore. Not the council, not Corvan, not his sharp little Luna and her bought healer. You are under my protection, and my protection is not a whim, whatever they whisper in my galleries. Do you hear me, Sorrel? She did. And for once in her memory, sitting on a cold stone floor with moonlight pouring from her own eyes, Sorrel let herself believe that someone had meant it. Then the clouds outside shifted, and the full weight of the winter moon fell through the window and across her where she sat, and the silver in her eyes flared so bright it threw her own shadow up the wall, and the pendant at her throat went suddenly, searingly hot, and she gasped. On the other side of the door, everything went still. Sorrel, the king said. His voice had changed. It was low and rough and stretched taut as a bowstring over something she had never heard in him before. Something had reached him through the wood, through the iron, through all the years of her mother's careful magic. Some scent, some thread of what she truly was, slipping loose at last beneath the naked moon. Sorrel, he said again, and she heard him rise slowly from his chair. Open the door. Sorrel did not open the door. She sat frozen on the cold stone with her back against the wood, and her silver eyes streaming light into the dark, and she did not move, and she did not breathe, and she waited for the handle to turn from the other side. It did not turn. You will not force it, she said at last. Her voice was barely a thread. No, the king said. I told you I would not, and I meant it. But you should know what I can smell, so that you understand why they will never stop hunting you. When you came down that staircase, I caught it for half a breath, and I have not slept since, because I have not scented anything like it since the war. There is something in you, Sorrel, that the whole of the old world once went to war to possess. Your mother hid it well, but the moon is stronger than any charm, and it is loosening its grip, and when it lets go, every wolf with a nose will know what I knew that night. Her hand closed hard around the little silver moon at her throat. What am I? She whispered. Something worth more than a crown, he said. And then, gently, when the fear in her sense spiked so sharp she knew he could taste it, but tonight you are only a tired woman on a cold floor, and I am only a man who would like her to sleep. We will find the rest out together, in daylight, where you are safe. Good night, Sorrel. She heard him go. And though she had every reason in the world to lie awake in terror, she slept, and she slept deeply, more deeply than she had in more winters than she could count. The days that followed were the strangest of her life, because they were kind. By day the king walked with her. He showed her the winter conservatory where roses bloomed in the snowlight, and told her the names of the packs whose crests hung in the long hall, which she might trust, a very short list, and which she must never turn her back upon, a very long one. He was warm the way banked coals are warm, quietly, from somewhere deep, so that you did not notice you had stopped shivering until you were already warm through. She discovered, on the third day, that the most feared wolf in the realm kept a three-legged hound. The creature was ancient and enormous and hideous, one torn ear, a grey muzzle, a leg lost to the same war that gave the king his scar, and it followed him through the palace at a rolling lurch and slept across his feet in the council chamber while lords trembled. Its name was Bramble. It took one look at Sorel, decided she belonged to its person, laid its great ugly head in her lap, and would not be moved. He does not do that, the king said, staring. Perhaps he has better judgment than your court, Sorrel said, before she could stop her tongue. And the king laughed. It was a rough, startled sound, as though it had escaped him without permission, and it changed his whole scarred face, and Sorrel felt something in her chest turn over slowly, like a stone rolling off a grave. She began to tease him after that, in small, careful ways, and found to her astonishment that he let her. She teased him that the whole realm believed him a monster, and the truth was that he could not so much as scold a lame dog. Little by little, the woman she had been before Ashmore, sharp and quick and unafraid, crept back out of hiding, and the king watched her come back the way a man watches the sun rise, as though he could not quite believe he had lived to see it. It was on the 6th night, through the door, that she learned his name. "You have called me your majesty 40 times today," he said. "I counted. It is beginning to feel like a wall." "What else I would call you," she said. There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower, and something in it made her press her palm flat against the wood as though she could feel him through it. "Emrys," he said. "My name is Emrys. No one has used it since the war. I find I would like to hear it in your voice." "Emrys," she said softly into the dark. And on the other side of the door she heard him breathe out, slow and unsteady, like a man set down at last after carrying something heavy a very long way. But kindness, she was learning, was a thing the world did not permit her to keep for long. On the 7th morning, Wynne came to her white-faced, and the news fell on the small warm thing that had been growing in sorrel like a killing frost. "The council convenes at the next full moon," Wynne said. "Lord Corvin has brought a sworn testimony before them, a healer's word that you were lawfully declared wolfless and lawfully cast out. They mean to force the king to give you back to Ashmore." Sorrel's blood went cold. "He will not let them," she said. Wynne twisted her apron in her hands and would not meet her eyes. "He is one voice, my lady," she said, "and there are many on that council who have wanted him gone since the war, who whisper that a king who lost his own mate cannot be trusted to guard the realm. They will use you to break him. And there is only one bond in all the law of wolves that a council cannot overturn, that no testimony and no vote can undo, once it is made." She did not have to say which bond. Sorrel already knew. She had known it since the healer at Ashmore first lied over her ribs. There was only one claim in the whole world that no man could take back: the mate bond. And when the moon came full, unless it was made, they would drag her home to die. She waited 2 days before she found the courage. She told herself she was being practical, that it was the only shield left to her, that it meant nothing beyond the saving of her own neck. She told herself so many times that she almost did not notice how her heart raced at the thought of him, or how she had begun, in the dark, behind the door, to want him in a way that had nothing to do with councils or law. She went to him in the afternoon, in daylight, when her eyes were her own and her secret was safe. Emrys stood when she entered, as he always did, and Bramble thumped his tail against the floor, and the winter sun came through the tall windows and lay across the map spread on his table. He took one look at her face and went still. "Something is wrong," he said. Sorrel closed the door behind her. She had rehearsed this 100 times, and every word of it left her now. "The council convenes at the full moon," she said. "You know what they intend." "I know," he said. His jaw had gone hard. "I am fighting it. I have not stopped fighting it since the day you came." "I know a way they cannot fight," she said. And then she said it, all in a rush, before her courage could fail. She told him there was one claim no council could overturn. She told him it was the only wall high enough to keep her safe. She told him, her face burning, her voice unsteady, that she was offering it to him, that he could take the mate bond, that she was asking him to. The silence that followed was the longest of her life. Emrys did not move. He did not reach for her. He looked at her across the sunlit table, and then slowly turned away toward the window. And she watched the line of his shoulders go rigid, and knew, with a sick and sinking certainty, that she had made a terrible mistake. "No," he said. The word landed in her like a stone dropped down a well. "I see," she said, the words very small. "Forgive me. I should not have." "Sorrel." "Do not," she said. "Please do not be gentle about it. I have had a great deal of practice at being unwanted. I would rather you were quick." He turned then, and the look on his face stopped her breath, because it was not indifference, and it was not disgust. It was grief. "You do not understand," he said, low and rough. "It is not that I do not want you. Heaven help me, wanting you is the least difficult thing I have done in more years than I care to count. It is that I know what happens to what I bind myself to." She stared at him. "Before the war," he said, and each word seemed to cost him something, "I had a mate. I was not a king then, only an alpha's second son with more temper than sense, and I loved her the way you love, when you are young and stupid enough to believe the world will let you keep things. And when our enemies could not defeat me on the field, they went to my house instead. They knew a bonded wolf feels his mate die, and that it would break me, so they made certain I felt it. From very far away, in the middle of a battle I was winning, and I have never, in all the years since, stopped feeling it. Sorrel's hand had risen to her mouth. That is what my bond is, Emrys said. That is the crown you are asking me to set upon you, not a shield, a target painted over your heart. The moment I claim you, every enemy I have, and I have more than any man alive, will know exactly where to strike to destroy me. I would be handing them the knife and showing them the place to put it. He shook his head. I will keep you safe, Sorrel. I will burn down the council chamber before I let them take you. But I will not save you by making you the next candle I have to feel go out. I would rather lose the crown than lose you the way I lost her. He meant it as tenderness. She knew that even then. But it did not land as tenderness. It landed on a woman who had been told her whole life that she was too little to be wanted, and all she heard, beneath his beautiful and terrible reasons, was the same word she had heard in the high hall of Stormcrest and in every room she had ever stood in. No. I understand, she said, though she did not, and she left before he could see her face crumple, and she did not hear him say her name, once, softly, to the closing door. The attack came that night. She was at her window watching the moon climb, her eyes already turned to silver, when Bramble began to howl 3 rooms away, a raw and frantic sound she had never heard from the old dog, and then her own door burst inward off its hinges. There were 3 of them. They wore no crest, and they moved without a sound, and the long knives in their hands did not shine like steel. They shone white, silver, the one metal that could kill a wolf and would not let the wound close, and Sorrel understood in a heartbeat of pure animal terror that these were the accidents Corvin had promised, come at last to make her death look like misfortune on some quiet night. She screamed. She had no wolf she could reach, no claws, no strength, only a scream, and it tore out of her as the nearest blade swung toward her throat. And then the connecting door behind her exploded inward, and Emrys was there. He came through the wood and the iron and years of careful distance, and he was between her and the silver before she had finished screaming. She did not see him shift. He did not shift. He met 3 armed killers as a man, a wounded king with no wolf between him and the metal, because there had been no time to become anything else, and he did it to put his own body in the space where hers had been. It was over in moments. 2 of the attackers lay dead, and the 3rd had fled through the ruined door, and the room stank of blood and silver, and Emrys was still standing, swaying, one hand braced against the wall. Emrys, she said. He turned to her. He smiled a little, as if to reassure her. Then he looked down at his own side, where the front of his shirt had gone dark and wet and was spreading, where a broken length of silver still stood buried to the hilt beneath his ribs. Ah, he said softly, as though it were a small and disappointing thing. And the king of Olvareth folded to his knees on the bloody floor and pitched forward, and Sorrel caught him before he struck the stone, and the silver burned her hand where it met her mother's charm, and above them both the full moon poured its cold light through the broken window onto a dying man and a woman whose eyes had begun, unnoticed, to blaze. They tried to take him from her, and she would not let them. The palace came awake in a roar. Guards flooded the ruined room, and healers after them, and somewhere below Bramble was still howling, and through all of it Sorrel knelt on the floor with the king's head in her lap, and her hands pressed to the wound and would not move, would not be lifted away, would not surrender him to a single pair of hands she did not know she could trust. In the chaos, no one marked the color of her eyes. She kept her head bowed and her hair loose across her face, and used the one small freedom that gave her to stay at his side. The silver was the trouble, said the head healer, an old woman with steady hands and a grim mouth. Ordinary steel a wolf heals from in a night. But silver poisons the wound and will not let it close, and this has gone deep. It is drowning the one thing that could save him. His wolf. Without it he cannot heal, and if it reaches his heart, then king or no king, he will die like any man. Then draw it out, Sorrel said. We are trying, my lady, the healer said. But you must let us work, and you must prepare yourself. I have seen strong wolves fall to less than this. Sorrel did not leave. Through that first terrible night she stayed, changing the cloths, holding him down when the fever made him thrash, speaking to him in a low, steady voice, even when he could not hear her. She told him about the conservatory and his ridiculous dog. She told him she was sorry, over and over, though she could not have said for what. You foolish man, she whispered against his hot forehead. You would not bind yourself to me to save me, and then you threw yourself on a silver blade the moment it came for me. What was the sense in that? Near the darkest hour, in the depths of his fever, he began to speak. Sorrel, he said, though his eyes were closed and he did not know her, did not know anything. Where is Sorrel? Get her out, they will come for her again. Do not let them take her. She is safe, she said, her throat closing. She is here. She is safe, I promise you. Promise me, he said, gripping at nothing, at the air, until she put her hand in his and let him crush it. Promise me she is not, he could not finish. His face twisted with a grief far older than tonight. Not another. I cannot feel another one go out, please, not her. And she saw that even now, even dying, even drowning in silver and old sorrow, the last thought in the King of Vareth was not for his crown, or his wound, or his life. It was for her. She held his hand through the worst of it. And it was there, in the dead middle of the night with her guard down and her heart cracked wide open, that it finally happened. She felt him, not his hand in hers. Him. His fear came through their joined fingers like cold water, sharp and sudden, and not her own, and beneath the fear a pain so vast it stole her breath, and beneath the pain, threaded all through it, impossibly, a warmth that had her name written in it. For one single heartbeat she stood inside another person's heart, and what she found there, under all the terror and the poison and the guilt, was love. Enormous, hopeless, terrified love, held down for years by a man who believed loving her would kill her. The feeling vanished as fast as it had come. His grip loosened, he sank back into the dark of the fever, and the connection went with him, and Sorrel was left kneeling on the floor with her heart slamming and her silver eyes wide, staring at their two joined hands as though she had never seen them before. What was that, she breathed? There was no one to answer her, but some deep, buried part of her, the part her mother had bound away, the part that woke a little more with every passing night, whispered that she already knew, that it had a name, that it had begun the moment he set his body between her and the silver and was still forming, thread by thread, with every hour she kept her hand in his. By the grey of dawn his fever had broken. He was not healed and would not be for a long time, if ever, for the silver had done its work and no one yet knew whether his wolf would ever rise in him again. But he was alive, and his breathing had steadied, and when the first light touched his face he opened his eyes and found her there, in her daytime shape, hazel-eyed and haggard and still holding his hand, and the relief that crossed his ruined face was so total that she had to look away to keep from weeping. You are here, he rasped. Where else would I be? She said. He tried to answer and had no strength for it, and his eyes fell shut again, and Sorrel finally let herself be led away to sleep for an hour, no more, before she returned to his side. She did not know, as she slept, that the third attacker had reached Ashmore by then and told his masters everything, that the king lived but barely, that his wolf was silver-sick and silent, and that the most feared alpha in the realm was, for the only time in his reign, a wounded man in a bed who could not rise. She did not know that Corvan smiled when he heard it, or that Calanthi's family had already sent fresh riders to the capital, or that the council, smelling blood in the water at last, had sent a summons under seal to Stormcrest, commanding the woman called Sorrel be delivered to their session at the full moon to answer for her fraud, king or no king, wolf or no wolf, willing or in chains. The summons came under seal a few mornings after the silver, and Emrys read it from his sickbed, with Sorrel standing white and silent at the foot of it. Then he did the thing that no king had done in the memory of the realm. He refused it. Write to the council, he told his steward, in a voice that had no strength in it and no yielding either. Tell them their king is unwell, and that he will not be sending them a woman to murder, not now and not ever, and that if they wish to debate the matter, they may come north and do it to my face. Then he lay back, grey and sweating from the effort of that much defiance, and looked at Sorrel. We are leaving, he said. There is a lodge in the far north at Frostmere that my enemies do not know I keep. You will be beyond their reach there while I mend. And I will mend, he added, though the lie of it sat plainly on his worn face. And I will bring the whole of that council to heel when I do. They travelled north for 4 days through deepening snow, the king wrapped in furs and unable to sit a horse, the great 3-legged hound curled at his feet in the carriage, Sorrel across from him watching the colour come and go in his face. And when at last the lodge rose out of the white silence, small and dark and half swallowed in drifts, with the black peak standing over it, and no living soul for a day's ride in any direction. Sorrel felt something in her chest ease that had not eased since the night of the ball. Here, for once in her life, there was no court to perform for. Here she could simply be. The days at Frostmere healed them both, though only one of the wounds was silver. Emrys grew a little stronger each morning, enough to walk the length of a room leaning on her arm, then the length of a hall, though his wolf stayed silent in him, drowned and unanswering. And she saw how that silence grieved him more than any pain. A wolf, who could not feel his own wolf, was a man locked out of half his own soul. He did not speak of it, but she felt it, in the small moments their hands met, the vast cold quiet where his beast should have been. And she, in turn, gave him a piece of the truth at last. She told him about her mother one afternoon by the fire, the words coming slow and halting like water working through ice. She told him of the woman who had raised her behind shuttered windows, who had made her swear never to be seen after dark, who had pressed a small silver moon into her hand with the last of her strength and told her to wear it always. "There are those who would give anything to find what I have hidden in you," her mother had said. Sorrel told him she did not know what she was, that she had spent 11 years being called hollow and had almost come to believe it, and that the only thing she knew for certain was that the charm at her throat was failing, warming a little more each night, and that whatever her mother had bound away inside her was rising, and that she was afraid of the day it broke free. Emrys listened to all of it, and did not once reach for the pendant, did not once demand to see, and did not press for the thing she was not ready to give. When she finished, he said only, "Then we will meet it together, whatever it is, on whatever day it comes." And Sorrel, who had braced her whole life for people to take, found she loved him a little more for the thing he chose not to do. On the clearest night, seeing him stare out at the moonlit ridge he could no longer run, she wrapped him in furs and led him out to sit beside her, beneath the enormous northern moon, so that even if he could not run it, the sky he loved would not be taken from him. She kept her face turned from him, for her eyes had long since gone to silver. And they sat together in the cold, blazing dark, the wounded king and the hidden woman, and for a while neither of them was afraid of anything. It was there, under that moon, that she felt the charm at her throat give its first small crack, a sound so faint that only a wolf could have heard it. A hairline splitting in the old silver, and a heat that flared and did not fade, and beneath her skin something enormous turning over in its long sleep and beginning at last to wake. "Not yet," she begged it silently, pressing her hand to the failing moon. "Not yet. Not here." But the thing inside her had waited 11 years, and it was done with waiting, and far to the south, where the moon was climbing toward full, her enemies were already riding north. The rider reached Frostmere on the second night, half frozen and loyal to the death, one of Emrys's own scouts who had killed 3 horses getting there ahead of the news. "They are coming," he gasped at the fire, while Sorrel wrapped his blue hands. "The council has named her a fugitive from lawful judgment. They have declared that any alpha who shelters her shelters a fraud against the crown, and that the king who defies their summons has forfeited their faith. Lord Corvin rides at the head of it with 100 swords and the silver to arm them, and a writ that says he may take the woman Sorrel by any means he must. They will be here by the full moon." The room went very quiet. Bramble lifted his grey head and growled at nothing, and Emrys, who had spent a lifetime learning exactly what his love was worth to the people who wished to hurt him, made the decision Sorrel had been dreading since the moment he took the silver in her place. "Go," he said to her, after the scout had been sent to sleep. "Tonight. I will give you coin and a fresh horse, and the name of a port where no one will ask questions, and you will ride east and keep riding, and take another name in another land, and live." Sorrel stared at him. "What are you saying?" "I am saying the truth I have known since the ball," he said, and his voice was steady and terrible. "They are not hunting you for what you are, not yet. They are hunting you for what you are to me. I made you matter, Sorrel. I stood up in that hall and put my name over your head, and every enemy I own has been trying to tear it off you ever since. The silver in my side, the swords on the road, all of it was meant for you. As long as you are mine, you are a target, and I am too broken now to guard the target I made. If you vanish, if there is nothing left to connect you to me, they lose the reason to chase you. It is the only shield I have left to give you. My absence. You are trying to save me by throwing me away," she said. Her voice shook. "Do you know who else threw me away and called it wisdom? I am not him, Emrys said low. Then do not act like him. He rose unsteady and crossed to her, and for one moment the space between them went taut as it had gone in the sunlit study, and his hand came up as if to touch her face, and hers rose to meet it, and their fingers were a breath apart, and the half-formed bond between them strained toward completion like a thing starved. And then he closed his hand into a fist and stepped back. I felt one candle go out, he said hoarsely. Since the war, I have not stopped feeling it. I would sooner die myself than feel yours go out. Go, Sorrel. Please, let me lose you the bearable way. She could not breathe. Everything she had wanted was standing before her, telling her to run for her own good, and through the fraying bond she felt exactly how much the words were costing him, and that only made it worse, because it meant he was not being cruel, he was being noble. And noble men, she was learning, could break your heart more thoroughly than cruel ones ever managed, because you could not even hate them for it. I will not go, she said. You will, he said. I will not, she said again, and she turned and walked out into the snow before he could see her weeping, and stood alone in the killing cold with the moon overhead and the charm burning at her throat. Behind her in the lodge, the man she loved sank into a chair with his head in his hands and did not follow, because he could not, because he had already decided to lose her, and the deciding had taken the last of what the silver had left him. Neither of them slept. And in the deep of that night, the charm at Sorrel's throat cracked a second time, wider, and the heat of it woke her from a doze, and when she stumbled to the little mirror, she saw that the silver of her eyes had spread. That light was rising off her skin now in the dark, faint and cold and impossible to hide, and she knew that the choice her mother had spoken of, the choice she had put off for 11 years, was no longer hers to postpone. It would break within a day, she could feel it, and when it broke, she would be revealed to the whole world for exactly what she was. She only had to survive long enough to find out what that was. They came at moonrise on the night of the full moon, the night the council had chosen to end her, and they did not bother with silence, for there was no one in all that white waste to hear. Sorrel heard the horns first, the same horns she had heard her first night at Stormcrest, and then the torches came crawling up the valley like a river of fire, 100 of them and more, and at their head rode Corvin on a black horse with drawn silver at his hip. Emrys met them at the door of the lodge on his own 2 failing feet, a sword in his hand and no wolf behind it, a king with nothing left but the shape of a man, and the will to die in front of the door she stood behind. You cannot fight them, Sorrel said. There are 100. Then I will fight the first 100 and not look at the rest, he said. Get to the horses. Ride out the back while they watch the front. He did not turn around. I am sorry, Sorrel. I am sorry for all of it, but I am glad, whatever comes, that I stood up in that hall. That is the one thing in all these years I do not regret. And then Corvin's men were on him. She watched from the doorway as the man she loved met a wall of swords with a body the silver had already half killed. She watched him take one down, and a second, moving with the ghost of the warrior he had been, and she watched a blade open a long red line across his back, and still he would not fall, keeping his broken body between the horde and the door, because behind the door was her. He was going to die. She could see it. He was going to die exactly the way he had told her he could not bear to feel her die, and he was going to do it on purpose, and he was going to do it for her, and something in Sorrel that had been bound and buried and cold hollow for 11 long years said no. She reached up and closed her hand around the little silver moon at her throat, her mother's last gift, the veil that had kept her hidden and safe and small, and thought, I am sorry, Mother. I know you meant to save me, but I am done being saved this way, and she tore it off. The charm shattered in her fist, and the world went white. It came out of her like the moon from behind a cloud, like all those held years released at once. The snow lit up for a mile, the horses screamed and reared, and the king's attackers threw themselves flat with their faces hidden, because their bodies knew, in the deep animal way, older than any council or crown, exactly what had been unleashed among them. Where Sorrel had stood there was a wolf. She was vast, larger than any wolf living, and she was white, white as the moon itself and burning with the same cold light, and where her paws touched the snow it shone. She was the thing the old world had gone to war to possess and been broken doing it. She was the last daughter of a line the histories called Moonborn, the wolves said to carry the moon in their blood, hunted to the edge of legend, and hidden, at the very end, inside one small girl behind one small charm, by a dying woman who had loved her enough to make her nothing, so that she might live to become this. Corvin, on his black horse, looked at what the wolfless cast-off had become. And Sorrel saw the exact moment he understood what he had thrown away. Not a hollow woman, not a mistake he had corrected. The highest blood that had walked the earth in 100 years, standing over him in the snow with the moon in her eyes. He ran. They all ran. A host armed with silver, and not one of them stayed to raise it, because there are things you do not fight, and she was one of them. She did not chase. She turned instead to the man bleeding in the snow before the door. Emrys had fallen to his knees, and he stared up at her with no fear in his face at all, only a wonder so complete it was almost grief. And when she came to him and lowered her great luminous head, he reached up with a shaking, blood-slick hand and laid it against her cheek. "There you are," he breathed. "There you are." I knew. From the first breath on the staircase I knew there was a moon inside you, and through the place where their skin met, the bond that had been forming thread by thread since the night he took the silver, the bond he had refused and feared and tried to throw away to save her, came surging up all at once and complete, and this time neither of them pulled back. She felt everything he was, and he, for the first time, felt her. And her moonblood, which was the enemy of silver as day is the enemy of night, poured across that bond and into him and found the poison drowning his wolf and burned it out of him like frost off a window pane. Emrys arched and gasped, and deep in the ruined dark of him something long silence stirred and lifted its head and answered. His wolf came back to him in a rush that knocked him flat in the glowing snow, and when he rose again, he rose whole, healed, his own great dark wolf standing steaming beside her white one under the enormous moon, the two of them alone and alive in a field their enemies had fled. By the grey before dawn they were themselves again, two people in the snow wrapped in one fur, and Emrys held her as though she might yet vanish. "You are moonborn," he said. "Do you understand what that means? Every pack in the realm will kneel to you. You are higher now than any king. You could rule the whole of it in your own name, and you would never need." He stopped. His jaw worked. "You would never need a broken man who could not even guard your door," he finished quietly. "You are free, Sorrel. Truly free. For the first time in your life you may choose anything at all." And there it was again, one last time, the man throwing himself away for her sake. Sorrel took his scarred face in both her hands. "Then I choose you," she said. "I choose the man who stood up in a hall full of people who hated me and said my name. I choose the man who put his body between me and the silver before he would put his name over mine. You gave up your peace for me when I was nothing, when I was hollow, when there was no crown and no bloodline and no reason on earth to want me except that you did." She pressed her forehead to his. "I have been wanted for my usefulness and thrown away for my uselessness my whole life. You are the only one who ever simply wanted me. So no, I will not rule alone. I will not go free. I choose you, Emrys, you stubborn, noble, impossible man, and you do not get to be brave enough to stop me." For a long moment he could not speak. She felt, through the bond, everything moving through him, the disbelief, the guilt trying one last time to rise, and then, at last, breaking apart, and the thing beneath it that he had held down for so long finally allowed up into the light. Then he kissed her, there in the shining snow, and it was nothing like the desperate thing she had once offered across a sunlit table. It was a man coming home, and the bond between them blazed up warm and gold and permanent, and Sorrel, who had spent her whole life hiding what she was seen at last, completely, and wanted anyway, and it did not break her, it made her whole. They returned to the capital in the spring, and the whole of the realm turned out to see them come. Word of Frostmere had run ahead of them the way fire runs through dry grass, so that by the time the king and the woman he had defied a council to keep rode back through the gates of Stormcrest, there was not a soul in Vereth who had not heard that the wolfless cast-off was moonborn, the last of the old high blood, higher by lineage than any alpha alive. The same court that had laughed at her in the high hall lined the road now in silence, and as she passed they knelt, every one of them, lords who had called her a broken thing pressing their faces toward the stones. Sorrel felt nothing looking at them, not triumph, not spite. They had never truly seen her, not when they mocked her and not now when they bowed, and a person who could not see you was not worth the weight of your anger. The council that had condemned her did not survive the season. The healer who had been paid to call her hollow was found and brought south, and under the eyes of the whole assembly he confessed the lie, the coin, the family that had paid it, and the plot to see a stray meet with an accident on a quiet road. Calanthe's house fell in a single afternoon, stripped of its lands and its titles and its place, and Calanthe herself, who had sharpened her whole life to a fine, cruel point, was last seen leaving the capital in a plain cart, unbowed to and unlooked at, which for a woman like her was a death of its own. As for Corvin, he came to her once more, at the last. It was at the great gathering held to name Sorrel and Emrys mates before the realm, in the same high hall where he had once called her a mistake he had corrected. He crossed the whole length of that hall while 1,000 eyes watched, and stopped before her, and bowed lower than he had ever bowed to anything, and when he lifted his face, there was something in it she had waited 2 winters to see. Regret. And beneath the regret, unmistakable, wanting. "My lady," he said, low, so only she would hear. "I did not know. I swear to you I did not know what you were. If I had, I would never have." He wet his lips. "It is not too late. Blood such as yours was never meant for a broken king. You were promised to Ashmore once. You could still." Sorrel looked at the man who had thrown her away for being nothing, come crawling back the moment she turned out to be something, and she felt Emrys go still and warm at her side, not gripping her, not claiming her, simply there, letting her answer as she chose, the way he had let her choose everything. "You are right," she said pleasantly. "It is not too late." And she watched the hope leap in Corvin's eyes, and let it hang there one cruel and perfect moment before she finished. "It is not too late for you to learn the difference between a woman who is worth something and a woman you are told is worth something. When you can tell them apart without a healer's word to help you, you may find yourself less alone." She smiled at him, cool and gracious and utterly closed. "Congratulations on your marriage, Lord Corvan. I do hope your Luna proves worth the trouble you went to." And she turned from him and did not look back, and Corvin stood rooted in the middle of the hall he had once ruled, holding his crown and his court and his careful alliance, and not the one thing in all the world he had realized too late that he wanted. Emrys took her hand. His wolf was whole in him again, the silver long burned away, and the scar through his brow crinkled when he leaned down to speak against her ear. "You enjoyed that," he murmured. "More than I should admit," she said. "Good," he said. And there was the rough, startled laugh she had first pulled out of him over the head of a 3-legged dog. He drew her hand into the crook of his arm and walked her toward the doors, past every face that had ever looked away from her and could not look away now. "Come," he said. "Bramble has eaten a courtier's glove, and there is a small diplomatic incident I would rather face with my mate beside me." They had each been thrown away once, cast off by a world that could not see what stood in front of it. They had been no one's first choice. But out of all the crowns and bloodlines and careful alliances in the whole wide realm, they had, in the end, chosen each other, and there was not a counsel or a curse or 100 silver swords that could unmake it. And that, Sorrel thought, as the great doors of Stormcrest opened before them into the light, was worth more than the moon. Thank you for listening. I hope this one stayed with you. Tell me in the comments, do you think Emrys was right to try to send her away to keep her safe, or was he only running from his own heart? I would love to hear what you think. And I will see you very soon for another story.